Shari, it's great to have you here. And has the gender gap tracker made a difference? Are we hearing women's voices more often?
It's a complicated answer. So the short answer is yes. We went from 27% to 32% in Canada. The gender gap tracker incentivized journalists. We got 1,800 of them, which in Canada is a lot. We have 2,200 women in the database. They're being invited to speak all the time. On the downside, the pandemic disrupted media as it did everything else. And so over the past couple of years, women's voices have dropped again, and we're at 28%. So it looks like incremental change, but we're hopeful that the gender gap tracker will long-term make a difference. And one of the other things that has allowed us to do is we did a deeper dive into the data, and we discovered that 60% of the most quoted people in media are politicians. And that was revelatory because it told us we can't fix the level of women's voices and contributions to public discourse until we're reaching parity in politics.
Women's voices in politics, and that's one of the areas that you really shifted to ensure that those voices are heard. What is it that women in those conversations bring to the party?
There's so much. You know, I have more in common with probably every woman in this room than I do with the lovely man I've been married to for 30 years. And so when 70% of the decision makers don't have our experiences, whether they're pregnancy and the pay gap or sexual assault or harassment or all the things in between, they can't possibly develop policies and programs that meet our needs. And here's what else we discovered, and this may not be news to all of you, but I thought Canada was a leader in terms of women in politics. We are so not. I thought we were in the top 20. We're 60th. That means, and the US is 70th. That means that there are dozens and dozens of countries around the world that have prioritized making sure women are at the table, developing policy, sharing their insights, and the fact that other countries have done this, many dozens of them have done this. They've been deliberate about prioritizing not just geographic representation. That may be important, but gender representation is critical. We know the research that makes clear that when women are involved in decisions, we heard that this morning about climate change, about economic policy, the status of the entire country goes up.
One of the things in your research which I found really fascinating was that you did these word clouds so that women actually mention certain words that don't come up in other conversations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I did share the word cloud. I have a few with me if people want a copy. The obvious ones, the predictable ones when women wrote op-eds were women, equality, sexual assault, but there are all sorts of words that were not obvious that included police and racism, evidence and impact, food and water. And so it's not that men don't care about those things, but on aggregate, when you look at the things that women surface and we prioritize, they're often different than our male colleagues and family members. And we really need to be there in parity like other countries are doing.
Definitely changes the discourse, what we're not just talking about, but thinking about. Now, you also have another initiative that you started, and I think it's hashtag Toxic Hush campaign. What is that?
So one of the things we kept hearing from the women in our database, especially Black women, Asian women, Indigenous women, Latina women, is that they are being inundated. If they speak up, they are being inundated with abuse online, and now we're seeing that translate into real-life violence. Nancy Pelosi's husband, just the most recent example. We've had many in Canada as well. And that represents an existential threat to lots of things, to democracy, but to equality, because all of the equality gains that we've made in the last 50 years have come about because women have been prepared to stand for office, to speak in the media, to ensure that their voices and perspectives were shared. And now the toxic hush of online hate is threatening all of those equality gains because women don't want to put their families at risk. They don't want to step into the light if we're not regulating social media and doing something about clamping down.
And I know at a previous conference, we talked about women in technology, particularly being targeted. And now it seems that's almost every profession where women take a visible role. But existential threat, I mean, that's a really serious descriptor. Why are you using that term?
Because we have made gains. We wouldn't all be here in this room if there had not been doors opened and opportunities, if we hadn't been educated and supported and mentored. So if suddenly the level of abuse that is being facilitated by platforms that are facilitating anonymity, they are amplifying misinformation, they are turbocharging hate directed at especially women and especially at diverse groups who are already underrepresented. Our democracy depends on all of those voices. And so if we women in this room and others around the world are saying, you know what, I can't do that, I'm not going there, that's a problem. And one of the things we know is that when women are at greater percent in media, in politics, the tenor of the debate changes. So our very presence in the room, if we're 50-50 in Congress, in the Senate, in parliaments around the world, we get to change the conversation to make it more civil, to make it more respectful, to prioritize the economy or the environment, to do what's ethically responsible.
And the thing about it is that I interviewed Shari before, and the name of her company is Informed Opinion, and the light bulb went off in my head. Oh, informed, so people can have an opinion, but if it's not an informed one, if it doesn't have the voices of women engaged and people of color, it's not.
It's not informed.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not informed. And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Informed Opinions is not a company, although we do workshops and keynotes to generate revenue. We're a charitable nonprofit. And so the work that we do is funded by donors, by government, by the revenue that we generate. We're a small organization, but we wield a mighty impact as a result of constantly pivoting from what does the data say? Oh, what do we need to do as a result?
So what could we do? How can we help? Are there steps that we IWF members as individuals and in our forums can take to address and forward this issue?
So I do have three things. The first one is to reject complacency. I think one of the reasons that the US and Canada have gone on at only, we're 30% politicians women, and in the US you're 28, we have accepted incremental change, and we need to stop that. We need to reject the status quo and demand better. That's number one. Number two, we need to use our voices and influence and resources. And in this room and in our membership, we have incredible influence and resources, and we need to leverage those to force change at the legislative level. There are lots of ways we can do that. In Canada, one of the things we're doing is we're developing a Paths to Parity document to help legislators, lawmakers understand this is how they did it in Sweden. This is how they did it in Mexico. Mexico is number 4, just so you know. US, yes. So women and legislators in other countries didn't accept incremental change. They said, okay, Women are 50%. They need a voice. We know the world and our country will get better, so we need to insist on that. And number 3 is to access our paths of power, go to our Balance of Power website. We're eager to share the insights that we're developing, the tools that we're developing to support you in advocating in your countries. And if you are in a country, because I'm sure there are many here who are in countries who are doing much better in terms of women and politics, wouldn't it be great if we convened an IWF forum to share strategies that other countries have used to get to 45 or 50% and the difference that that's made in their countries on every level?
So this pathway to the documentation that you're having, that's coming out, how do we get that?
So it's not ready yet. We're working on it at the moment. It's going to be Pathways to Parity. We're going to use it to lobby politicians in Canada. Shari at informedopinions.org. You can find me on the app. Please reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about what we know, what we're learning, and the strategies we're implementing. We would love to share them.
Thank you, Shari. You are such an inspiration, and we thank you for giving your voice to ensure that all of our voices are heard. You lift us all up. Thank you. So, to all of you, to all the members of this forum, you too could be on this stage. We invite you because we'll be having and eliciting ideas that remake the world, and you probably have one of those ideas. So we want to hear from you. Is it an idea that's a breakthrough? Is it transformational? Is it an idea that's scalable across communities in our globe? So we will be asking you for your submissions next year, so please keep an eye out for the call for candidates. So, and we're going to be in Detroit, right, next year, so you know you want to be on the stage. But a point of personal privilege, since I have the stage, I want to introduce you to 2 people who love me dearly that are here today. My best girlfriend, Kathleen Knight, and her husband, Bubba Knight, solo artist, Gladys Knight Tips. Woohoo! And he is the person he was at Hitsville, USA in Detroit. So please say hello to my dear friends. Well, coming up next is behind the scenes. You have your walking shoes on, right? Buses are gonna leave between 2 and 2:30. Please check the back of your badge for the bus departure time. And thank you from Ideas Remaking the World.